Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the panelists here in the Zoom meeting and to you, the audience, watching via the My Onvent platform. Welcome to this partner session on circular textiles in the Nordics, challenges and opportunities for emerging economies. We have been looking forward to this. And by my side, I have Apurva Arya. And Apurva, she will be taking us through the agenda of the meeting. Just briefly on Nordic Circular Hotspot. This is, the summit partners, the sponsors of this, and they are kind of a subset of the more than 100 partners that has entered into Nordic Circular Hotspot. I will now hand. My name is Kim Jørg, I should say. I'm heading the circular economy team at Lifestyle and Design Cluster, the Danish cluster for promotion of innovation in the Danish design, fashion, and furniture industries. And we are among the pioneering organizations in Denmark when it comes to circular economy. Now I will hand over the word to you, Apurva, for taking us through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. A very warm welcome to everyone tuning from around the globe. I'm Apurva Arya, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Circular Innovation Lab. We're a circular economy think tank based in Copenhagen, and we work with national governments, UN agencies, and international organizations to drive the transition to a circular economy. Textiles is one of our key focus areas. I'm really excited to be part of this session today in partnership with the Nordic Circular Hotspot. As members of the Nordic Circular Hotspot, it's one of these collaborative platform that is driving cooperation and collaboration within the Nordics to help accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And in today's session, we're going to be exploring the opportunities and challenges of implementing circular strategies for emerging economies and how these can be addressed in the Nordics. To quickly take you through this session, I'm going to be introducing our panelists, and then they're going to be presenting themselves a little bit and the affiliation they're part of. And then we're going to have a panel discussion on our topic. And finally, we're going to be concluding this event. Like we all know, the fashion industry is one of the world's second most polluting industries, accounting for more emissions than the aircraft and the shipping industry combined. And historically, our global clothing consumption has quadrupled since the 2000s. Despite these many challenges, there are tremendous opportunities and innovations happening within this industry. And given the new legislation within textiles in Europe, we see a lot of potential for collaboration and cooperation, both within the Nordics as well as the manufacturing hubs around emerging economies. And we're especially going to be talking about, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and so forth. So, moving on to, introducing some of our fantastic panelists today, we have with us Gauri Sharma, Senior Manager, Shahi Exports, which is one of India's largest exporters of ready-made garments. Then we have with us Mr. Siddharth Lula. He's a principal at Intercap, driving key initiatives for the Circular Apparel Innovation Factory, an industry-led initiative wherein he works closely with key stakeholders such as brand manufacturers and innovators. Next, we have Dr. Associate Professor of International Business and Strategy, Aalborg University, and the project lead for the research project on circular economy in Bangladesh's apparel industry. And representing a Danish fashion brand, we have today with us the CSR Manager of Message, Miss Isabella Holmgaard. A very warm welcome to you as well. And last but not the least, we have Mari Pusk, the Head of CSR and Sustainability from the Danish Fashion and Textile which is the Industry and Employers Association for Danish fashion and textile companies. Now I'm gonna be opening the floor to Mr. Siddharth Lula, who's gonna set the scene for today's discussion. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much, Apurva.
Siddharth, you can share your presentation now.
Sure, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Kim and Apurva. I'm really excited to be part of the session. So just to the context in terms of the fashion industry and the global challenges that we're facing with that. Today, as Apurva did mention that the textile and apparel industry is one of the world's most polluting industries and also has some systemic and structural challenges. The industry essentially is responsible for 20% of the world's total industrial water pollution. We noticed that 80% of the entire textile waste that is generated, often ends up in landfills or is incinerated, leading to pollution. And to put things into perspective, 8.1% of the world's GHG emissions are a result of this specific industry. For the brands and people who are focused on the business side of things, to present a business case also, given the amount of wastage that we have in textiles, as per some estimates, we see that on an annual basis, there's basically around $52 billion of textile which is lost due to wastage. Given this stringent attention that has come to the sector of late, and also that we are facing a very serious issue when it comes to climate change, there have been some of the leading brands that have come together now, and we've seen that around 140 retailers at the UN COP26, recently signed the Fashion Industry Charter, wherein they ensured that by 2040 or 2050, they will achieve net zero. And in order to put things into perspective, they have maintained very strong commitments that by 2030, they will cut their emissions by 50%, which would basically entail sourcing 100% of their energy from renewable sources, and also increasing the use of environmentally friendly materials, which is a major shift that we're seeing in the global textile industry. So the key question being that, what does this really mean for the emerging markets? And, that is also the reason why we're here. And that's essential because, while the brands are, selling globally, we're seeing a lot of push happening also in terms of sales, from a Southeast Asia and emerging markets perspective. But most of the manufacturing which happens today happens in these emerging markets, which includes countries in Southeast Asia, like India and Bangladesh. Sri Lanka also is one of the largest exporters in the world. At the same time, in the global South, China is also one of the major manufacturers. But the key challenge really is this. As per research, we realized that even with these strong commitments, wherein you eliminate coal in terms of manufacturing, at the same time you look at moving to 100% renewable energy. Given the current systems and current technology, by 2030, we expect brands as well as manufacturers still fall short of the climate targets or the science-based targets that they have set, around 36%. And that really is where the entire challenge lies. Having said that, based on some recent findings and conversations that we've had with different stakeholders within the industry, also based on some of the research that we've done as well as some of the research that we have sourced, we realized that in order for the world to achieve its science-based targets, or more specifically the textile industry to be able to achieve its net zero goals, it is possible through a combination of different innovations. We see that by 2050, 47% of the current innovations that are currently available would be able to mitigate climate emissions or reduce the amount of GHG emissions. And some of these innovations include renewable electricity, sustainable materials, energy efficiency devices, as well as alternate fuels where you're migrating from coal to sources which are more agro-based, like let's say biofuels. In some countries, textiles is used as a source of biofuels. In a country like India, we use agri-based as a source of biofuel. At the same time, there's also push required for new age solutions, wherein this would entail generation of next generation materials, new efficient modes of using water in terms of waterless dyeing technologies, drying processing, solutions that bring in traceability to ensure that textile waste is managed in a better way. And these are areas where investments would be required. So while the current existing solutions could help you achieve a reduction of, let's say, 15 to 20%, it's some of these new innovative solutions which could help a transformative change in terms of reducing emissions by 30 to 40% in itself, which is the kind of solutions that require a push, for the emerging market. But having said that, this is not going to be very easy, and this is also one of the reasons why a lot of us have come together on a platform, like this today, which has been organized by Kim and Apurva, because in order to achieve this, it's important to have an entire cohesive approach, which looks at the entire supply chain, which includes materials at the input, whether it's recycled materials, alternative materials, or next generation materials which are sourced from research laboratories. At the same time, looking at how we could reduce emissions across the supply chain by adopting different solutions across, let's say, energy, water, dyeing, or better processes. And finally, also ensuring that we can close the loop by ensuring proper waste to value recycling processes, which could be whether the way we manage plastic waste or textile waste or any other wastes that happens during the manufacturing process. And the most important thing, and especially in the emerging economies in countries like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, where the population is very large, we need to ensure that in this entire journey towards sustainability or environment efficiency, we also create circular and green jobs, which ensure that the kind of conditions that the workers are working in, are well taken care of, and we've created a proper framework, to transition towards green jobs. So finally, and what I'd like to conclude this presentation by, would say that this really would entail an entire ecosystem approach of pre-competitive collaboration, which would be a combination of access to capital, which could come from different foundations and some of the leading corporate brands which are investing in the sector, access to new technologies. I did highlight a bit about some of the innovative technologies that are required beyond the existing solutions, networks, which is a combination of working with different manufacturers, some of the large brands, industry organizations like the Lifestyle and Design Cluster, like IntelliCap, which I represent, as well as knowledge, which comes from, various different sources. We have Professor Mohammed here, who's stalwart, and, looking at also different knowledge sources which come from, SMEs and entrepreneurs who've been working on the ground and can give us suggestions in terms of how is it that we could get the best global solutions and make them more affordable to be adopted in the emerging solutions. So, I would like to say that, pre-competitive collaboration, which includes industry capacity building, as well as, policy advocacy, is required for us to ensure that we can work together to transition towards a net zero textile and apparel industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for this wonderful overview, and also, really describing the magnitude of the challenges, looking at this entire value chain. And I'll now hand over the word to you, Gauri, for your perhaps closer to the ground, a little more practical view, but also very innovative thoughts on this. Please, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Kim. And thanks, Siddharth, for setting the context, because that makes it easier for me to sort of share my perspective, because I think you covered the wider ecosystem. Apurva already mentioned, Shahi is a large manufacturer based out of India. My role is around sustainability, innovation, and partnerships. And I think just based on what Siddharth said and, some of the topics we're discussing, there is a growing realization in the industry that manufacturers are actually the linchpin to achieving some of these circularity goals. So, like Siddharth was saying, renewable energy and coal substitution is not enough. We need material transformation, better dyes, more efficient operations. So how will that be achieved? Manufacturers are where the majority of the environmental and human resources are utilized. So, I think there's, like I said, there's growing realization that one supplier making shift has ripple effects across brands and regions. So I think broadly leaving manufacturers out of any sort of industry strategy, whether at a brand or government level, is a missed opportunity. And I think this is something that, everyone's realizing, which is why we have forums like these and other forums where manufacturer voices and manufacturer proactiveness is becoming key. And I think that can have a huge impact. Like, just as an example, Shahi has achieved 70% renewable electricity nearly already. So this translates to, the GHG emission goals of our customers and contributes to their goals. And I think that there are manufacturers that are sort of taking on a more proactive role in circularity. Just as an example, like, apart from having dedicated teams for environment, compliance, HR, at Shahi, we have a dedicated team for innovation, of which I'm a part. And we work very closely with partner organizations like CIF. We've been working with them very closely for the last 1 year, with organizations like Fashion for Good, HK Data, because we're realizing our role in this transition. And we're even taking up independent projects, whether it's recycling, agro-waste fibers, microbial dyes. And I think what we've come to realize is a lot of these innovators and startups, some of the technologies that Siddharth sort of showed on his screen, we do work with them. And we've realized that they benefit a lot working directly with manufacturers. So the kind of feedback that our technical teams can give them, guide them on their technology, on calculating their ROI, honing in, certain aspects, that can't come from a brand, because manufacturers are the ones that run operations. So any technology trying to reform water recycling has to work directly with the manufacturer. So this sort of connect between manufacturers, innovators is also really important. But I think just to draw some focus to some of the challenges that manufacturers also face, I think among many challenges, of course, technological, regulatory, I won't go too much into those, but I think one of the main challenges we do face is misalignment sometimes between ambitious sustainability goals and sourcing practices of brands. So, of course, a lot of brands, including many European and Nordic brands, have set very ambitious sustainability goals because of the evolving EU textile strategy that's coming in. But I think what maybe we're not realizing as an industry is that circularity and sustainability are very long-term goals, which requires long-term relationships and commitments between brands and suppliers. It requires joint investments, risk sharing, and a complete relook at how we do pricing and negotiations. So what we see sometimes is, brands, sustainability teams have very ambitious goals, but the sourcing practices are not evolving to achieve those goals. We still see similar sourcing practices as 10, 15 years ago, maybe even worse. Some surveys and some data might show that some practices are declining. So what I think this does is, like, it's not creating the right incentives for suppliers, even though there's, sort of proactiveness, and there's, maybe purpose behind why suppliers might want to do this. But to invest in new technologies, you need the right incentives, right? So for example, if a manufacturer like Shahi wants to invest in a recycling technology for pre-consumer waste, they need to have certain off-take volume guarantees from a brand that the recycled material coming out of this machine will be bought by a customer. There'll be some long-term commitment, so that the supplier can see a ROI on their investment. And we've done this, right? As an organization, we've invested heavily in vertical integration in renewable energy, only because we have a few strategic brand partners that have been with us for a long time, and we see growth of business with them. We know they'll stay with us if we invest more and more in sustainability. So I think more of that can enable a lot more circularity investments. So I guess, what I've found in my experience working in this space, I've also done research on this topic on buyer-supplier relationship, talking to various people in the industry. And I think fundamentally what might be holding us back is the transactional nature of the buyer-supplier relationship, which is historic. And unless we fix that, the circularity and sustainability goals may make slow progress. So I guess what I'm saying is we need more of a mindset shift. Like I said in the beginning, we need to view and acknowledge suppliers as the knowledge bearers and equal partners in the industry. Otherwise, if you zoom out, it's kind of like all the risk is with them, but none of the rewards are with them. So we kind of need to balance that out a little bit. And I think there is enough purpose, proactiveness, willingness to do things at the manufacturer level, which I think sometimes people don't realize. But maybe it's a matter of aligning the incentives. I spoke about the brand point of view, but this could be from a regulatory point of view as well, because while EU strategy and EU regulation is shifting, regulation in emerging economies isn't as quickly. So those incentives are also weak for manufacturers.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it. Thanks.
thank you so much, Gauri. I think you made a very clear case, very well argumented, and there's most certainly something to think about and talk about at the Nordic and the Danish end of this. Now, next speaker is Dr. Mohammed Rana, and we're looking forward to hear your insights in the CREATE project and your research strategy as it happens, because we see this as really one of the projects that can enlighten us all when we talk about really turning these global value chains far more circular than they are today. So please, Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, all the speakers. I think Gauri and Siddharth have already made a kind of, set the scene for understanding the dynamics of garment industry and the circular economy. My name is Mohammed Bukhtiyar Rana. I'm an associate professor of international business and strategy. I'm also the director of sustainability lab at the Aalborg University Business School. And I'm also the visiting scholar at the University of Cambridge on sustainability and circular economy. And I'm actually leading the largest research project on the global garment industry, and in particular Bangladesh and the circular economy transition in the garment industry. So we have started the project. I have recently edited a book on the global garment industry's upgrading. I will actually walk you through a little bit to some of the challenges that my like other colleagues have already highlighted. But I will go a little bit deep down from the theoretical perspective, because I do research on global garment industry, I think, for the last 18 years. Well, when we talk about circular economy, we are actually trying to close the loop. And that's a very common knowledge. And we try to either prolong the longevity of the product, or try to actually reuse the components again and again in order to reduce the CO2 emission and water consumption and all other toxic materials release. Now, actually, if we look into the circular economy, especially in the apparel sectors, we see that it's actually not happening in one country, but connecting many countries. So therefore, actually, there are many activities spread across the world. And that's why actually I try to focus on the three things here. One is the governance, second one is actor and activities, and the third one is contexts. When you talk about the garment, there is a buyer side, mostly in Europe and America, where the markets lie, and also the suppliers from mostly the developing countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, and all others, including China, of course. So how buyers are actually controlling suppliers? Where is the bargaining power of the suppliers, and to what extent they have bargaining power? In the past, actually, until now, we have had the experience that buyers had the highest power and actually they were, controlling the design, controlling the market, and therefore they had a kind of arm's length relational governance, like buyers who wanted to actually, make a negotiation on something that they want the suppliers to produce, and then they set the price. But when it comes to circular economy, a lot of innovations need to take place in the supply side. If we consider the pre-production waste, suppliers actually have the best knowledge how they could use it in the best way. So there should be a kind of different form of governance, which should include more collaboration, more participation, more partnership. And therefore, buyer needs to actually contribute more in terms of also the long-term commitment, also sometimes the co-investment. When it comes to the actors and activities, when we look at actually different value-added, activities and the actors who are involved in it, everyone has a different context and everyone actually has a different dynamics inside. If we look into the largest suppliers, like my colleagues Gauri is coming from, they have actually more resources, management expertise, the knowledge, and also the technology inside the firm. So they can actually make transition in shortest possible time compared to the medium and small scale suppliers. And actually, they are having always small quantity of supply from many buyers. So therefore, the buyers actually do not tend to pay high attention to them to make transition. Instead, buyers also tend to focus on the large suppliers where they have maximum, interest with. So this is also a challenge, I would say, that we need to look at. Then there is a context. India and Pakistan are actually a little bit ahead of Bangladesh in terms of the circular, companies, circularity companies, making kind of fiber from the reused clothes or, wastage. But why it is? In Bangladesh, there is no rule at all on circularity. There is no tax system. There is no tax incentives. And therefore, actually, there is a need to study and also the policy development. But also when it comes to India and Pakistan, they have, kind of segregated incentives offered, but not in a kind of incentive and policy structure for the developing the entire ecosystem. So I think country-specific challenges are there in relation to actor-specific challenges. Let me quick through actually some of the things. Here I'm trying to present to you the three important actors in this transition. One is the buyer, second one is the supplier, and third one, actually, the most important often I consider, is the worker and employee. And the very common approach of sustainability until now, what I have experienced around the Western world, is that they always have a kind of focus on something when regulations are there. Now EU and every country in Europe actually has a kind of policy and also the regulations. So companies are, running after CO2 emission, water consumption reduction and everything. But then this is going to be a kind of piecemeal approach. We need to look at sustainability and also the circularity from a very 360-degree approach, where workers and employees, they need to go for reskilling. Their actual well-being needs to be taken care of, and they could be laid off. So we also need to take care of this issue. When it comes to the buyer, we actually see that sometimes they do not have a very comprehensive strategic plan for green transition. And also they often do not have a very balanced perspective of, transition and circularity adoption. Sometimes they also go for a piecemeal approach that if we do that, because there is an incentive or there is a punishment, so we can overcome this. There is also a kind of, lack of, co-value creation. They do not tend to, delegate responsibility to suppliers, and they also sometimes do not go for co-production of creating value. There is also a lack of commitment from different suppliers from other countries, not particularly Scandinavian, but if you look at the American and British, they do not try to go for long-term commitment to the suppliers, as actually Gauri has highlighted. And that's also a problem for the suppliers. Why they would transform? Because that involves a lot of money and the changes. And also there's a degree of uncertainty if they cannot actually recover all those expenses which they make for transition. Then supplier side, actually, we see, at least from my research in Bangladesh, I see that there's a lack of long-term strategic plan for the company. They're always moving for 1 year, the next year return. Also, they have a lack of technology, because technology is going to play a pivotal role for transition, and especially in circular economy, like component to reuse. And until now, actually, we are focusing only on the pre-production. But what happens when actually we're going to take back all the European, like second-hand clothes to India and Bangladesh? There is no law that allows us to import them for making, fabric from, fiber from there. And there is also a lack of green energy in the country. If I give you an example of Denmark, it has around 80 to 90% green energy, or 95%. So what happens? Companies can easily access to green energy. But when it comes to India or Bangladesh or Pakistan, in Bangladesh, only 1% is a green energy, a renewable energy out of 100%. So that's also a challenge. And we are actually giving everything to the shoulder of the supplier. Then there is a lack of financing from the banks and also from the governments due to lack of, the country's system and the regulations and policy. So when it comes to buyer countries, we see also there are some challenges in terms of the fast fashion, attitude change of the consumers. Who is going to change the consumer's attitude is a question. We also talk about it, and EU is trying to make a policy, but then who is going to change their attitude towards fast fashion is a question, right? And also the lack of concerted initiative there. The European countries do not actually come and join together to bring changes in India, or say in Bangladesh, or in Pakistan, or in Vietnam. So there is always a kind of country-specific or buyer-specific approach. So we need, I think, more collaborative approach from country side, also from the buyer side, in order to make a difference in terms of how circular economic transition could be taken place. Also from the supplier countries, actually, there's a lack of policy, I have already highlighted, lack of ecosystem and collaboration, and also lack of education, particularly on sustainability. And education includes also the research and development. Also, there is a lack of finance from the institution side. And in particular, I think my colleagues have already highlighted lack of green energy supply from the countryside. Now it is completely, left on the buyer suppliers' shoulders. So with this, I would like to actually conclude. I think I have already taken a lot of time, but there are also opportunities, like new design thinking, new R&D opportunity, and also the consumer market creation from the circular product and all this. So I think I would like to conclude here, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. I think your speech was really a strong complement to the first speakers. I think you set up this very systematic frame of understanding. And it's really what a job we're having ahead of us for sure. Now I will hand over the word to you, Isabella Honkor, the CSR manager of Message, because you are indeed, into this and also, working for a company that definitely want to do this transition, but also find it hard in many ways. Please, Isabella, the word is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you. It's very inspirational also to hear from the sources themselves, because we, of course, I'm from Message, as Kim just told you. We are, just to briefly, all of you maybe online who doesn't know us, but we are a business in Denmark. We've existed quite some years now, and we are both a retailer. So we buy other brands and sell them in our retail stores, both in Denmark and Norway, and online as well, and of course shipping to all over Europe and elsewhere. And then we have, on the other hand, we have several of our own in-house brands as well. So in that sense, we've got to have a kind of a two-step way into this discussion as well. But on the brand side, of course, this is of great interest for us also to hear these insights. And I must say, from our point of view, I just took a deep dive into the mapping we've done in 2021 about how many suppliers are we working with in India, and we are currently working with 3 just of last week signed yet another one. So we've got 4 now suppliers in India, and it's actually I just touch points with our buying manager, purchasing manager as well. And she said, well, it's a field where we want to expand, because we see there is some great things for us, and there are some great collaborations that we want to elaborate on in India. But of course, there is always these, and actually, Dr. Mohammed, you just said it very well. There is this interface somewhere, or a gray zone, where we say, well, while we wait for India and elsewhere as well, but now we're talking India, to have the green energy and everything to enable this green circular transition, while we wait for all of that infrastructure to work, how can we then, discover and develop our cooperation together? That is something that I don't have the answers, obviously, but it is something that I can say from a brand perspective that we are interested in. But we also see some challenges, as you, Dr. Mohammed, also said. And there is something about us being very, very much aware of the fact that we need more data, we need more traceability, and we as well also, we know our limitations as a brand. I know that when I say we need more transparency, it also starts from us. So we're well aware of where we also come short. And of course, that's another thing. I know, Guri, you mentioned this about a change of mindset. There is something here that if we can force that through or inspire that through, I don't know which is the carrot or whatever is the best, but there is a kind of change of mindset. And for now, it's going to be interesting from where that will come from, and this is a place to start, of course, but I'm not sure it will come from us tomorrow, but we'll be part of the journey, and then hopefully we'll find a pace where we can have a change of mindset, because it is needed, obviously, and we acknowledge that as well, definitely.
Thank you, Isabella. We can wait till after Christmas. It's okay.
Well, thanks.
And now, because I think you really very much expressed the dilemmas in this for small and medium-sized brands in particular, I think. Giving the word to you, Marie Busk, from the Danish Fashion and Textile, you for perhaps a generic perspective, also from what is actually coming towards us from EU, because change will happen. So the question is, can we be in this group, in this collaboration between India, Bangladesh, Nordic brands, can we be proactive, and how should we be proactive? Please, Marie, the word is yours. From your car, I can see.
Yes, sorry for the infrastructure here. No, I think the presentations that have already been presented point to the complexity of the issue, and I think that Isabella also very well presented. What do you do then as a small brand? How do you understand the complexity, you see it, but how do you as an individual, smaller brand, actually take action and do something differently tomorrow compared to what to do today? So, and I think that is the key essence for many of the small and medium-sized companies that we represent from the Danish side. We represent approximately 350 brands. We have one big member, which is Bestseller. They are a league of their own, and can do a lot of innovation, conducting a lot of innovation with the manufacturing countries, and then we have the rest. And I don't have the answers, but I do know that I think the small and medium-sized companies need to get out of their comfort zone in terms of collaboration between each other, in terms of working together with manufacturers in the producing countries, because they don't have in Denmark, we don't have the manufacturing capacity and innovation knowledge in order to solve this challenge on our own. We need to work together, and we need to work together with the manufacturing companies. I think that this is a realization that is coming to us as a branch organization, but also to more and more of our members, because the regulations that we are facing will be coming over the next few years. So one thing is recycled material, one thing is traceability, another thing is I know the whole eco-design space. There are so many different regulations coming in from different angles that it will be extremely difficult to work as a small and medium-sized business unless we try to address some of these challenges together. I don't know if I answered your question, Kim, but that's at least one of some of the perspectives that I've been thinking along while listening to the very, very interesting presentations.
Thank you, Marie. I think using, I totally agree. You should, really be looking at your comfort zone and be able to get out of that, because collaboration is key here, definitely. I myself, I'm not a fashion or textile person, but I've been working in the field through Lifestyle Design Cluster for over 4 years now. And I really see a lot of kind of exaggerated secrecy and, keeping your kind of design and your whole sourcing and value chain to yourself, where I see no risk, to be honest. I mean, this is a medium-sized Danish fashion brand is so small compared to the market and compared to also the potential in actually being proactive and beginning to join forces and beginning to collaborate proactively with the, for instance, Indian suppliers and sellers. So I think this has been a great opening, and I don't know about you, Apurva, if you would like to pose a question or two, while I can then also really invite our audience at the broadcast event to submit their questions using the chat, and then we will see if we can have time to answer some of your questions from the audience. But Apurva, do you have a first question or elaboration?
Absolutely, Kim. I think Mari mentioned the new EU textile strategy and how there's going to be, set product design requirements that are going to be digital passports. And I'd love to hear both Gauri and Siddharth's perspective on what are the manufacturers back in India doing right now to, be able to keep working with European brands moving forward, and like how, which areas do they need help and capacity building in, especially with the brands they're working in. I think that's something that would be super interesting to hear, and how are they taking stock, and what's happening to make this transition happen.
I can just quickly share, Siddharth, maybe then you can add. So I think there is a lot of, for the lack of a better word, anxiety, because there's like different regulations, right, coming. And I think it is sometimes overwhelming to think that as a manufacturer, what would all this practically mean? Mm-hmm. So I think there is increasing recognition that maybe when the legislations are being formulated, there needs to be a formal process of engaging manufacturers so that, there's, the legislation is better informed by practical realities of manufacturers, because, they will be most impacted by it. I also think, increasingly, a lot of manufacturers are collaborating a lot more, because you see a lot of, I know Kim said there's no brand collaboration, but there are way more brand collaborative initiatives, multi-stakeholder platforms, than there are supplier ones, right? So brands are getting used to pre-competitive collaboration. Suppliers may not have done that so far with each other. So as a result of these regulations, one thing that's happening is suppliers are talking to each other because they need to collaborate, discuss, and understand the impacts of these regulations in their regions or on their operations. So I think that effort is also sort of ongoing, of how can you fuel supplier collaboration as these regulations impact us. On your question about, working with brands, I think the way suppliers are experiencing the regulation is just more stringent policies from brands, more stringent codes of conduct, new programs, which is great. But again, if it's coming as differential targets and differential programs. So that can again be quite overwhelming for a manufacturer if each brand is coming up with its own separate targets. And then as a manufacturer, you kind of have to achieve various targets for various brands. So I think that's sort of happening. So I think some level of cohesiveness, agreement on how the regulation translates to manufacturers is needed.
And I'd just like to add one more thing before we give the floor to you, Siddharth. Like, how do you think this would affect the transactional buyer-seller relationship? Because like you rightly said, that there's legislation coming in, and that kind of it's a positive effect of it that increases collaboration on what this would mean, and that would definitely enable collaboration between suppliers, maybe even more less stringent on having Kim mentioned, like a lot of brands are very secretive about a lot of things, and that could also be a way to like solve this obstacle, so to say. But over to you, Siddharth. I would love to hear your thoughts on how this could have this change around the transactional nature of a buyer-seller relationship.
No, absolutely. Thanks for putting me in the spot over there, Ruva. I'll get a tip to answer. So essentially, the one thing that we need to realize is that beyond the EU regulations and EU requirements, there are a lot of regulations also taking place in developing countries. So in India, there are a lot of regulation shifts. In Bangladesh, we're not really seeing that happen as of now just yet. But given the conversations that we've had with some of the associations over there, we're expecting policy shifts happening in Bangladesh as well. Now, things traditionally, the entire drive towards sustainability or circular economy, at least in a country like India, has happened because the large brands, are forcing some of these changes for the manufacturers to meet their regulation requirements globally. And here we are seeing a lot of work actually being done by the manufacturers because there's a pure business case for it now. The thing is that if your production, does not meet a specific time-based target, or if the kind of materials that you're using are not sustainable in the long run, then you could also end up losing a specific, partner that you've been dealing with for a very long time.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing a lot of different shifts happening, wherein we're seeing manufacturers, invest in different solutions, which could be on the material side, wherein they're working hand in hand, with their brands to test these materials to see whether the brands are going to adopt these materials, and then they're making investments in some of the solutions. On the supply chain side, because of the fact that there are very stringent regulations, not only from EU but also coming from India, we're seeing different solutions across energy, water management. We're seeing less harmful dyes being tested, which may not have a business case today, but we're seeing investments in that to ensure that come 5 years, 6 years down the line, some of these solutions which could be less harmful but are expensive today, can achieve economies in the next 5 to 6 years. At the same time, we're also seeing a lot of collaboration happening between the brands as well, because there are a handful of 10 to 12 large brands, and these 10 to 12 brands do deal with some of the large manufacturers, which again would be, let's say, 15 to 20 within the country. And here there is a platform for there is essentially a forum where some of these brands could really collaborate. And last week I was in a forum where there were 6 or 7 of the large brands which deal with some of the large manufacturers, and they did discuss about how some of these brands really are working together to ensure that there's some sort of shared infrastructure that could be created, because they realize that a lot of these global solutions which are very expensive globally, for example, textile recycling, or whether it's some kind of material, it may not be commercially viable for a specific manufacturer to invest in at this stage. But if 2-3 brands decide to use that solution, then there's a case for it to be adopted by the industry in general. So we're seeing some of those shifts happen. At the same time, from a practical perspective, we also do realize that there are some policies that are coming in which may not really be very practical to put in place as of today. But we're also seeing forums coming up where we are seeing a network of brands and a network of manufacturers coming together to ideate today in terms of how is it that some of these solutions could be practically viable in the next 5 to 6 years. And we've also been engaging with the government per se, wherein we've had representatives from the Commissioner of Textiles of India being part of these forums to understand what is it that they could do in a more practical manner. So to answer your question, this entire transactional nature, which has been existing in the past, is changing to a bit of a collaborative nature now, because everyone realizes that they're in the same boat, so they need to work together to find a specific solution, because they're all dealing with the same policy shifts, and it is going to impact their business in the long run.
Thank you, Siddharth. And you say once again that actually the big corporations, the big fashion and textile firms, they actually know how to work together, pre-competitive collaboration. And I think, to me, it also becomes very clear that small and medium-sized companies, they need to be able to work far more together in this pre-competition stage, at least. And one last question here, or second last, whatever, what we have 10 minutes left, is what form should this collaboration have? Should it, for instance, be around, having common design manuals, circular design manuals that a group of, let's say, Nordic fashion brands can use in order to connect to Indian textile hubs, for instance? Would that be one way to go about it? And it could also be a question for Isabella and Marie, for instance.
Marie, I think I'll give you the word here, actually. I hope you don't feel like I put you on the spotlight, but I'm sure you have some insights here. Yeah.
No. I think, yes, that could be one way. I think another way could also be simply starting to share the same suppliers, because then you increase your leverage at the individual supplier, and you will be you have more influence. You will have more able to build a collaboration on material innovation or design innovation. I think what many of our members also face is that it can be very difficult to have access to some of those suppliers that have innovative solutions, simply because they buy quite a few pieces. Compared to the big players, they don't place orders that are like 10,000 or 50,000 pieces. They place orders like 300 or 500, and then, because they are not a big player, it can actually be difficult to get, engaged in a more strategic collaboration, because you're just a very, very small player. So if you go together, and I know this is quite controversial, but again, I think we need to think about how can we build forms of working together where we use the same suppliers, differ on design, business strategy, but in terms of supplier, the supplier ownership or supplier base, there could be some parts of sharing. Also in terms of investing in energy efficiency, certifications, etc., rather than each brand, doing their own investments, by pooling resources. There's a potential to drive change faster.
Yes, and Isabella, you can comment on this, but I mean,
now I put you on the spot, Isabella.
Oh, and yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm happy I know you well, because now I'm starting sweating. No, it's typical, giving you the word, or so to say, and asking you to answer fast, and then you come up with the solutions that I might not like, and that was kind of it. No, to be honest, it is pretty controversial that we should hook up with other brands outside our house and do this. I'm not saying it's not the way forward. It will just be something, again, a change of mindset or something. This would be something that we should do, like an active decision on. This is how we want to do business going forward. So I absolutely see the ideas of doing that, and also all of the opportunities that will exist and develop in that sort of commitment to this. So that I agree, but it is for now. It will be a step, let me say it that way. Yeah, but from our point of view as well, now that you're talking about, well, what we have in-house is these 3 brands. So we are, at least in our own home, we are doing these things and having those also in order to have the long-term relationships and so on, so that the different brands can cover up for each other in a development of a relationship to a supplier. But I hear you, and I will write it behind my ears, saying that this might be a way forward where we collaborate with brands outside our own house in order to strengthen relationships, transitions, and so on. Interesting, Marie.
Just to add to that point, and the thing is, I do realize that when it comes to brands, whether it's medium or large, there could be areas of conflict which are mainly design led, because of competition. But having said that, there are certain areas where brands can collaborate. So, for example, let's say like Isabella, touched upon that one point when for example, let's say a cluster of medium-sized Danish brands decide that if you're going to be producing garments, our garments are going to be produced in this specific manner. We're going to be focusing on, ensuring that we're reducing our consumption of electricity or water, or let's say creating the entire mandate in terms of what a sustainable product for them really means. And while they may have certain common manufacturers, but to the extent of capacity building, they definitely could work with some of these manufacturers to ensure that while the designs are not being shown to each other in terms of what the brand is making, but in terms of there are certain guidelines and frameworks which are set, which the manufacturers need to adhere to in to ensure that the mandates are being met, and also maybe support investments for shared infrastructure to be to be used by a network of smaller manufacturers to ensure that they can reach those sustainable goals which are being set, which a small manufacturer may not be able to invest in. So I think it's going to be a function of guidelines, mandates, and also some sort of shared infrastructure facilities or support in terms of capacity building for these small manufacturers.
And it definitely makes sense. There is like a trust thing here where we need at least just say out loud that there will be a development and a need for development of a trust, a very funded trust between suppliers and the brands working in that. Because right now, and it's not something that anyone will be proud of saying, but all of us knows that it's working so that whenever we send a design down, of course, we're like, do we trust that supplier enough for them not to share? And of course, we do with all of the ones that we work with. But in order to find new ways of doing things, and it's the trust thing where we really need to be sure that, and also the other way around, the suppliers need to trust us that we are in this for a long-term commitment. So there is a trust thing going both ways, but that's definitely a way ahead and possible as well.
If I may say a point, Kim, I think actually when we talk about the change, the question is who drives the change, who has the most power, and it's the brand and actually the institution, like the country. So when it comes to institutional policies and incentive structures for changing, they are not actually improving the way Western regulations and incentives are being developed. This is one thing that we need to also pay attention to. The other one, I think I would echo actually Siddharth, that already brand, they have their supplier network in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. And in this region, I did my PhD on this region, the trust is very low. Yeah. And therefore, actually, the collaboration between the suppliers is very much transaction-based instead of value creation-based. So brand needs to take initiative so that the collaboration is become more intense and resource sharing based.
Thank you.
Apurva, the word is
Thank you
yours.
so much, Dr. Rana, for the last insight of the session. I would, for the fear of getting cut off in the last minute, I'm going to thank all the panelists present here today. Kim, all the Nordic Circular Hotspot partners, and Ellen as well. I just want to quickly say that we're going to be running a transition group for the same topic, especially one key theme would be to how to foster collaboration between Nordics and the emerging economies. And I'm really excited to engage more brands and more stakeholders in this transition group. And thank you so much, everyone, for today. It was such a tremendously insightful session, and looking forward to engaging with you all again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Apurva. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.